Thank you, Father Dominic. Can you hit the record just to give us a backup copy? I'm recording this onto my mobile. Thanks very much. So tonight, or this afternoon, depending on where in the world you are, we're going to be looking at the rounds of the soul, and I just want to point out two things. See if I can get these two things right. Okay. So I want to talk to you about the effect of grace and the pedagogy. Okay, so if I don't talk about both of those things in the next few minutes, just give me a nudge. First of all, the effect of grace. Ephesians chapter 4, I think it's verse 22 or 23, says that we impart grace with our words. Okay, we impart grace with our words. Paul actually writes, do everything without complaining or arguing, because you impart grace with your words. So when we speak negative, critical, condemning words, these are words of power. Okay, so we have to be really, really careful, especially in the divine will. We have to be really careful how we criticize and judge and fight and argue and disagree with other people, because our words can be incredibly powerful. And as I take you through the rounds, you'll see what your words can do and should be doing. Okay, so you impart grace. Now, when I teach you tonight about the rounds of the soul in the divine will, God is going to be imparting grace to your soul to enable you to do those rounds. Okay, that's what it is to be an evangelist, to be involved in evangelization. When we proclaim the gospel, as we are doing tonight, the gospel of the kingdom of the divine will, in this case, God uses our words to enable the hearers to do what the word being spoken. So as I talk to you about the rounds, God will enable you to do the rounds. He will effect a transformation in your soul. Okay? The reason behind this is because of something called the pedagogy. Yeah. Now the pedagogue is the Greek word for teacher. But it wasn't just a teacher. The pedagogue was the slave who would take the student to the school, would sit with the student in the school, and then after the school had finished would take the child home to make, and at home would make sure that the child understood the lesson. So the pedagogue didn't just teach, they made sure the lesson was understood. And the New Testament tells us that God is the pedagogue. He's the one who becomes the slave in order to teach us. And John Paul II in Catechesis Tradendae called for a renewed pedagogy, so that when we proclaim the message of life, which I am doing tonight, God himself will be the one teaching us. And he teaches us by revealing truths to the soul and by forming the soul. So when you're being taught the theology of the divine will, which myself and Father Dominic are doing, we're not just teaching you dry theology. God himself is forming you. And that's a really important thing to grasp. This is not an intellectual instruction. This is spiritual formation. You are being formed by God the pedagogue. Okay? You're being formed. So please don't just come to the lessons thinking you're just going to learn something new or something interesting. God is going to unveil things and reveal things to you. Okay? So, on that basis, this is Louisa's diary. I'm going to quote from Father Joseph Nuzzi, page 474. Does he give a reference? Oh, yes, he does. Louisa, volume 16, March the 22nd, 1924. Okay. And Father Joseph begins, here Louisa provides an example of the way in which she makes her rounds. And in fact, in the index, Father Joseph calls this the purpose of the rounds. Okay, and when I'm doing a teaching on stuff, I like to find out the purpose behind whatever I'm teaching. I like to find the key points. So, Jesus, my love, I lay my intelligence in your will in order to find your uncreated intelligence. By this means, I wish to enlighten all created minds in such a way that you may feel your light being placed before all created minds and find rest for the sanctity of your intelligence. Please note the use of the word rest. It's very important in this. I lay my word in your fiat in order to place the light of your omnipotent fiat before all human voices, so that your breath and mouth may find rest. I lay my works in yours, to place the light and sanctity of your works before the works of men, so that your hands may find rest. I lay my little love in your will, in the light of your immense love, which I place before the hearts of all, to give rest to your weary heart. As I kept saying this, my Jesus calmly fell into a sweet sleep. Then after some time he woke, but calm, and pressing me to himself said, My daughter, I was able to rest, because you surrounded me with the light of my works, of my fiat, of my love. This is the rest I spoke of after I created all things, which is in Genesis 2:2, where it says God rested because he had finished his work of creating. Now, the prayer is an incredibly complex one. There's a lot going on in this prayer. But the rounds themselves are actually very, very simple. They're not difficult to do. The key thing here is the purpose of the rounds was so that Jesus could find rest within the creation that has effectively, well, for example, human beings have pretty much declared war on God. And Jesus wants to find rest, contemplative rest within his creation. So here's the process, folks. We do not rest very well in our society at the moment. Okay, the Western world, in fact the world itself, is 24/7 work at the moment. So we need to first of all learn to have at least a day a week where we are resting from our labours. 6 days you shall work, the 7th day you shall rest. It might be that the industry you work in means your rest day has to be a Monday or a Saturday, etc. But God requires us to rest for 1 day a week physically. As we learn that art of resting, we will learn to start resting interiorly, so that our prayer life isn't one of constantly telling God what we want him to do, but it becomes one of us resting lovingly and peacefully in the presence of the Father. That is a very authentic way of praying, and a very powerful way of praying, because it's a prayer of complete trust and love. When our soul is truly resting, and we are doing our loving, gentle, restful rounds of creation, redemption and sanctification, God himself can find rest within our soul, because our soul is at rest. Now at the minute, if we're not in these states of rest, then if God visits the soul, he finds the soul in a storm. And that's not his plan. He created your soul in his image and likeness, and God dwells, if you like, in an eternal infinite rest. So he wants to find the soul at rest and at peace, so that he can have rest within us and we can rest with God. And this is the purpose of the rounds. It's not, but strictly speaking, for us. The rounds are for us to glorify God and to give God rest. So God has given us an incredible privilege here, an extraordinary privilege, that we can actually do these rounds of creation, redemption and sanctification and enable God himself to find rest. Now, please don't ask me any awkward questions on why does God need rest? Because, you know, your guess is as good as mine. I'll have a chat with him. Oh, Gerard, good question. How is God defining rest? Because rest to different people means different things. Listen, if you look at Judaism, they are, if you like, our elder brothers in the faith. And it's a very simple thing. They do not work on the day of rest. It's very simple. It's not a complicated matter. Rest is rest. Okay? They do not work. They do not go out for meals. They do not go shopping. The electricity is off. The heating is off. They have a day of complete rest. They do not switch on the television because it means somebody else has to work. They don't go out for a meal because it means someone else has got to work. And I know from some of my friends who went to Israel, and they were staying in a hotel, and the food would be on these automatic machines, as it were. And on the Sabbath day, none of the machines were operating. So they had to manually get their breakfast. So they take it seriously. And for them, rest is rest. There is no rest, there is no work done from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. Okay?